Well, welcome everybody. I'm Cara Whitehill with Thayer Investment Partners. I am here with my illustrious panel today. Aman, is it Shahi or Shahi? Shahi, thank you. Canary Technologies. Blaire McCoy from Traversing.ai. Carrie Spooner from Rio Hotel and Casino, and Chris Smith from Kipsu. So thank you all. We're excited to be here. So to get started, we're going to set the stage. And where are you seeing the most productive applications so far in the voice AI and messaging space? So I'm going to start with you on the end, Chris.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Great to be here. And this is an exciting time in kind of our category. Messaging and digital engagement's been around for a while, but it's kind of perfectly coincides with AI really taking off. And one thing I would just suggest is before we sort of delve into some of the cool use cases, one of the things I think everyone should really think about is rather than going to develop your AI strategy, start with your business strategy. And Michael Porter, who's sort of the father of common day corporate strategy, sort of had two models in mind where he said you can either make outsized profits by reducing your cost below the industry, or you can increase your profits by charging a premium because you have a better offering. And I think that's a really good lens for how you think about how AI applies. And because depending on which route you pick, what you choose to use and what the use cases are is going to highly correlate with one of those two things. And so a lot of our work tends to be done around those that are trying to figure out how to increase the premium nature of their offering, whether it's repeat business or charging a premium for a night stay. And so the metric we look at very closely is sort of satisfaction, and how do we really leverage the technology to improve satisfaction.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up metrics because I was going to ask about that. That came up in one of the earlier sessions today, and the question was, are we using the wrong, old metrics and trying to apply them to a new technology that kind of isn't really suited for those metrics? Blaire, since you're kind of right in the middle of this, how do you think about that? What are some of the productive use cases that you're seeing, and how do you know they're productive? What are the metrics you're using to evaluate that?
I think ultimately at the end of the day, we're still measuring success by revenue generation and productivity, right? And so one of the first use cases that we have is going to be with my partner here, with Carrie over at the Rio. Abandonment rate was the number one metric for us. Was the risk was we have an abandonment rate issue and we need to solve for it. And so what we did immediately was take abandonment rate down to 0. And that was quite quick. And after that, the next step was, well, how are our AI agents going to resolve this without the involvement of a human? And today, I am proud to say that we are able to resolve, our AI agents are resolving calls with more than 80% of those calls without the involvement of a human, freeing up those humans to do other tasks, things that they care about to help with the customer service, which is a huge core focus, and helps them focus on the things that they need to at the hotel level. And then that frees up then and allows us to then monetize the revenue pieces that I was talking about, right? What are the ancillary revenue metrics that they're able to capitalize on? What are the revenue drivers from an ADR perspective that they're able to measure that they weren't able to track before? Those are just the pieces specifically with the Rio, but then there are other key components as well, like guest sentiment that is also critical to a lot of our hotel partners.
Carrie, can you color that in a little bit more from your perspective on the hotel side? How much of what you are kind of measuring and tracking now with the usage of Traversing.ai is the same or different than what you were tracking before?
Yes, I think to support the commentary from both the colleagues up on the panel, really ultimately, although abandonment rate is critical to our overall success, and we were shocked at how high it really was, for me, coming to the Rio, my focus I run revenue and database marketing and CRM, and I think, as a testament to the previous conversation and panel, offer execution and the customer journey is so critical to the support of the ecosystem of the casino hotel. So for me, it was really about offer redemption and looking at the traditional CRM KPIs and then why are we not succeeding in those areas potentially, and making sure that we were able to just fundamentally answer the phone to allow some of our older demographic of customers redeem their offers in the traditional ways. So, it's a foundation of looking at the overall business strategy and then taking the specific use cases and figuring out where the friction points are. And then certainly guest review, right? That's always at the forefront of running a proper hotel in Las Vegas, is looking at the experience, the reviews, and all of the trackability of human interaction that we need to have. The challenge is that, a function of that abandonment rate was just customers needing their service inquiries met. And so it really wasn't revenue generating or productive conversations. It was more just facilitating transactional execution.
Oh wait, where was the panel from the last one? We wanted to validate 30% were billing inquiries. We absolutely agree with that statement that the number one reason why customers call were for billing inquiries.
Yeah, Michael, I think, had mentioned that the requesting the folio for guest checkout post stay, and a lot of that was almost 50,000 calls coming to the Rio in a given month, and a function of just facilitating, and we needed to add some additional elements to our post-stay experience to satisfy the guest need.
Yeah, I will say I probably have to do that about half of the hotel stays that I do. So sample set of one, but for anybody who cares. So Aman, you cover a lot of territory with Canary in this topic, but what are you seeing in terms of the most productive applications, and what are the metrics that you're looking at on behalf of your customers for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is working, right? You guys can hear me? I think there's a lot of discussion that happens about how existing touch points with humans change with AI, but I spent a lot of time thinking about the fact that there are actually a bunch of interactions that never happen that AI can allow for. So in other words, 30% of the calls that are going to a front desk right now are not being picked up at all. And a third of those calls are actually booking related. So if you do the math there, 1 in 10 attempts to pay you money are going nowhere. There's no interaction happening. And where do those folks go? They either drop off and they don't book with your hotel, they go elsewhere, or they go to an OTA. So you've just lost some of your revenue right there. And so the fact that an AI agent can pick up 100% of the phone calls is the first thing. You're now addressing a set of touch points that never occurred. But then it goes beyond that, right? So you can think about how that AI has ready access to so much more information and the ability to take actions that are automated, that are taking into account your business rules and your business logic in a way that humans might not be best served to actually do in a number of cases. And so we kind of think about our AI agents as members of your team. They're not necessarily going to replace every use case that a human is going to be better placed to do. And I know we're going to be covering a couple of those topics in our discussion today, but those are sort of the net new value drivers that we spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, and so Chris, back to you. Do these numbers kind of jive with what you've seen at Kipsu and the types of messaging queries and use cases?
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of transactional routine stuff that can be taken off the team's plate. In the healthcare business, they have this really great phrase that they use to refer to nurses called working at the top of the license, meaning they want them to be doing the work that they are trained to do, not the cleaning of the bedpans that they could have others do. And I think that's true here too, that as we think about the ongoing labor shortage, that is a demographic issue that is not going to get resolved in the next 5 years, it's a big problem. And the need to continue to differentiate. We have to think through how we can position people to do the rich part of the role that can have the most impact on that long-term guest relationship. And so those routine things like getting folios out, that 30% of stuff is a great thing to kind of easily automate, work through that. And then for us, the question is how do we sort of reinsert them into the part of the journey that is the richest place where we can perform service recovery, or we can get people really engaged in a place that can make a meaningful impression on that guest. And so, yeah, I think the numbers sort of synchronize, but thinking a lot about how do we re-inject in places where we want to play a bigger role.
Yeah, and then what are some of the biggest points of friction in adoption? And Carrie, I'm going to start with you since you're kind of directly in that operating side. What do you see? Is it technical? Is it operational? Is it cultural? Like, where are you seeing the points of friction from adopting some of these conversational tools?
Yeah, I think certainly for in the casino business and especially in Las Vegas, a city that was built on the premise of human connection and relationships, it is a challenge to get both the consumer and the team members to trust that Rio Rita, we like to call our lovely virtual assistant at the Rio Las Vegas, that Rio Rita can actually handle the request and satisfy the guest need. And so there is an element of training both the consumer and creating an ecosystem where that's built on trust and recognizing that people still want that host relationship at the higher end, and allowing the mechanics of facilitating the guest needs to somewhat go away so you can have more meaningful connection. I think the other piece of Las Vegas, right, is people also support immediate gratification. They want it now. They need their towels because they've got to get out. They want to maximize their stay, and it's always a function of time and money, mostly time in Las Vegas. So you need to facilitate quickly, and that's how you build trust with the brand, is that you can satisfy the guest needs and then allow the traditional connection points to still exist. So I think for us, it's just been training the environment.
Yeah, Aman, what are you seeing in that kind of friction area?
Yeah, I want to build off of that point. I think the word you used was trust, and that's really key. In the 20 years of making phone calls in this sort of, at least this more recent era where you're going to have potentially a robot pick up the phone initially, it's very, very rare to sort of like call a business and be greeted by a human being, even today. I don't think I've one time said, after 10 minutes on the phone, wow, that was an amazing phone tree, right? Like, that's not an experience we've had. We've all had very poor experiences with robocall assistants that sort of pick up and you have to go down a specific path. And so what that leads to is every one of the guests who picks up the phone and calls and is interacting with actually a much more capable voice AI agent that can probably help you faster than you might be able to get your task done if you're waiting on hold or whatever else it might be. The first step is, oh wait, is this a robot? And then it is, I want to get to a human. Like, I do that all the time. So there's this just lack of trust that a technology service, a voice that you're listening to, that, by the way, right now, there's some technical gaps in the industry that will get better over time, where like, once you compress the audio over a phone line, it's going to sound a little bit more robotic than it might on your computer if you're listening to a demo online, right? So like, there's this element that makes it feel more robotic today that will get better quite quickly as we're seeing rapid scale here. But that sort of like reinforces that feeling of I'm talking to a robot, I want to get to a human, and the AI might not get the chance to sort of do what it does really well. And so that's something we spend a lot of time figuring out how to make that seem more human and approachable than it historically has been.
Yeah. And then, so Chris, is there anything that you're doing on the mitigation front to make it easier, to reduce some of these points of friction?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that that we spend a lot of time on. Number one is the data and how we get data. In our case, the guests have a relationship with these large brands. The brands have collected a large amount of information that they can use to sort of personalize that engagement. And getting that in a form that we can use and comes across seamlessly is hard. I'd also say that when it comes to automation, one of the things that the large language models are not good yet are really giving you a sense of confidence in this, how confident am I at answering a question? And they do it, but it's wildly off. And if you want to sort of make a determination on how much you automate something outright versus prompt versus don't answer, those types of decisions right now are still pretty challenging. And that can then lead to, of course, all the hallucination risk that the brands are sort of concerned about when it comes to sort of brand reputation. So, I think there's a little bit of a race around trying to figure out how do we score how good of an answer this is. and be able to have a determination aside from just the answer itself.
Yeah, I will give a shout out to the Westin over in whatever that is, National Harbor over there, because I got in Sunday night and I'm trying to find a place near the hotel to watch my Reds play the Brewers. And, I went to the ChatGPT and asked it, and I got a list of like 8 different places, but it was hard to tell like what was close. And so I went to the Bonvoy app and said, what's nearby that I can, go walk to and watch my Reds game. And they responded right away. So props to the Bonvoy app for that. And it was, a perfect response and right around the corner. So, but it was because it was quick and it was prompt and it was very direct, very direct answer to my query that I could tell it had value, right? And so, that's a nice little reinforcement of that application. What are you seeing in terms of mitigation and kind of reducing some of the points of friction in what you're doing with Traversing?
I think a lot of what we're talking about sits with education, not only to the consumer, but also to the teams that we're working with, right? We've talked a lot today around how the AI agents aren't going to replace, they're meant to augment a lot of what hospitality is going to do. And to do that, we have to train them how to use AI, right? What are these tools? How are they meant to be utilized? And how are we going to continue to better the customer service experience together? And so as we're doing that, we're working collectively with our senior leadership, the stakeholders, to say, here's what we're seeing. And if we're providing this data real time, we've got teams monitoring the calls, the transactions, and we're constantly improving on what those calls and the behaviors are, and we're creating those improvements autonomously, then we're able to then share with them and create those improvements and be able to optimize on the behaviors together in a collaborative environment, and then continue to train on what those next steps need to be. And I think that mitigates a lot of the concern, and mitigates a lot of the risk of what the consumer will then see, and then together, collectively, we're creating ways to educate the customer, right? Here's how you can use this. Here's how you should be using this. Hey, let us introduce you to Rio Rita or whomever else we're using along the lines.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, the training internally is critical, right? And the quality assurance. I mean, at the end of the day, it's technology. So I think the way that we've been successful about changing perception is doing a very detailed monitoring process of the calls and allowing the team members to participate in seeing the solution, what the commentary was provided to the guest, and really just having all of that data tracked so that there's an evaluation if there's any concern coming internally or externally. And so that's just critical to educating the internal approach and building confidence. And what we've found is a lot of times Rio Rita might actually, take a little bit of a bad rap when it really wasn't the level of decisioning that Rita made. It was that she was passed off to a human or another department that then in turn didn't answer the phone. And so the perception is Rita, for the guests, when they're in-house, starts to become sort of a household name, right? Well, Rita, I talked to Rita and she said X, Y, and Z, and then, that did or did not happen, and so you start to find that these one data point is not a trend, as we all know. And so the amount of positive sentiment that you've received with the number of calls that you've been able to support, sometimes, perception has the one call that and then you have the data to go back and demonstrate that that wasn't really the case. So, I mean, over the past 6 months when we've launched this project, our sentiment score is at 95%, and it's been really remarkable. And certainly you see it translate into transactions and bookings. But having the right QA measures, just like anything else, is critical.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so let's talk a bit about the human element of this, because we're in hospitality, right? How do you balance all of this automation that you're trying to bring into your organizations with the human side of service delivery? And you talked about training and looping in your team members to be part of this kind of QA process. But I'll start with you, Aman. How are you thinking about balancing, the human side of the guest experience that Canary is working so hard to automate?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing to accept is that AI doesn't do everything that a human will do, and I don't think it ever will. So you need to sort of like, as you're building the technology, be very humble about that fact and keep that in mind in how you're building the entire model of engagement. So what is also true is AI can get the right queries to a human faster than one of these phone trees that I'm clearly beating up today. But the idea being, if something is urgent, if something requires true emotional understanding and nuance, so somebody's having a terrible stay, or there's an issue within the hotel where there's a safety problem, you want to be able to get that person straight through to a human as quickly as possible. So you kind of architect this system not saying, hey, the goal is to get to 0% human interactions, which, to be honest, like when you're thinking about these robocalling services, that is literally their KPI. That's like their job is to prevent you from getting to a human being. This instead is saying, I have a really, really effective member of my team who knows how to triage things. And they're going to be able to handle a lot of stuff that isn't very valuable for me to handle, but they're going to bring me the things that really matter. And so that's kind of how we build these systems. We think about it from the beginning, not as a replacement, throughout the entirety of communication, but an enhancement to your staff, a way of sort of enabling the staff to, as Chris was mentioning, sort of focus on the higher ROI activities at the property or above the property.
Chris, how does that dovetail with what you're seeing?
I mean, I think you're absolutely correct. And this is like the $100 million question for the next 5 years for us, is at what level is a human involved? What level is a machine involved? How much can the guest tell in the middle of that? We started the business before AI became a big thing, and so started it on an entirely human model. And you would be really surprised at how rich the conversations turn. Initially, guests start by saying, hey, I need to order, or I need a comb. A very transactional request, which is kind of what you think we do. But then what happens is these discussions sort of evolve into this very human, I just made a friend with the person at the front desk. I'm asking him for recommendations on dinner. I'm taking a picture of the cocktail that, at the restaurant that and we're building that kind of connection. And I think that sort of word connection, like that's the new currency. Like, what is my relationship with you on a long-term basis? And how do we continue to refresh that and energize it with our guests? And what we know is that we as humans are, what governs our mood is four hormones. The fourth being, and probably most important that we don't talk about, is oxytocin, the cuddle hormone. And so, if we had a vehicle for actually measuring that, that would be the ultimate metric. It's like what level of connection are we creating? But I'm always surprised at when I talk to people about their experience of using what we do inside of a property. They go to like the actual dialogue of the interaction they're happening with someone. It's like that's the thing that they remember, right? And so, so how we navigate that, what's human, what's not, when it should be, I think we're going to be like tuning the hell out of that for a while here, but it is the sort of secret sauce that we have to sort of nail.
Got it. And so Blaire, your business is based on kind of finding all these ways to automate, but are there elements that you come across that you look at and you say, this actually shouldn't be, turned into some type of automation or AI bot or whatever. It really should kind of live in the human side of the hospitality delivery component of what you're doing. Are there any examples of that you can think of between, maybe from other clients or from Rio?
Reservation changes. No, I'm just kidding. That's a pain point of ours. No, in all seriousness, I think if I come from the hospitality world, I've lived it, breathed it since I was 15 years old. This is my passion. It has been my passion. The process in which you watch the evolution of from a hotel, from the front desk, from the front of house, from the back of house, and seeing what these pain points should be and where it's going to. We need this, right? We need evolution. We watch all these other amazing industries scale and have technology and access to move things forward. And then you've got hotels who are still running on systems that were developed 10, 15, sometimes 20, maybe 30 years ago, and you've got Band-Aids on top of them, right? And we need this, right? We need to be able to do more to service our guests in a better, more efficient way. And when the answer is, well, maybe we'll use a phone tree. I'll hit the phone tree too, okay? Maybe we use a phone tree to help with that. It's a Band-Aid, right? We're doing different things to not necessarily address the problem. We're doing things to fix a minute issue, and we want to take over and fix the core of the problem. We need to find a way to drive better direct bookings for the hotel overall, and that is the goal for hospitality or for hotels ultimately, and that's how we look to help solve the problems.
So we have a few minutes left. I want to talk about hospitality, and I'll put it in air quotes because it means a lot more than just what happens at the hotel on property, right? And so, we heard from Doug and, the digital identity conversation earlier, and kind of, yeah, Alex, yes, thank you. It's like I'm thinking cyborg, but I know that wasn't your actual formal name. But we heard a lot about that and kind of this concept of digital identity and stitching together the different components of the trip experience. And so I'm going to start with you on how can these tools bring more of the other parts of the trip into the hospitality experience? Is there anything that you're doing, because Vegas, you have so many things to do outside of just the Rio Hotel, which is a fabulous hotel, by the way. I've stayed there. But how do you think about that? Are there ways that you can use these tools, technologies, to bring in other parts of the total Vegas experience for your guests?
Yeah, and I think for the Rio, that's a huge selling point of our brand, being off strip, and having the legacy knowledge of the property from the 90s. How many people have been to the Rio? Probably back at that time, have had wonderful experiences there, and so trying to rebuild that level of brand awareness and trip frequency for our guests. It's critical for us to embrace the city of Las Vegas. And so we need to leverage our proximity to other places near the hotel, Allegiant, Area 51, all of the other fabulous experiences that are available within the city. And so having the knowledge base to support the guest. Now, for me, running revenue, I would like to keep them in the building, but but understanding it's critical to have the capabilities to offer different incentives is really important for us.
And so, Chris, how do you think about that? Because your messaging, there's a lot of content that probably is kind of beyond the property level that would be relevant to the folks that you're communicating with. How does Kipsu think about that?
Yeah, our partners they operate very large portfolios. We operate in 123 countries, and the relationship they have with their guest is that they choose to be affiliated with that, usually through a loyalty relationship, and that wherever they go, they're going to stay with that brand in that place. And that frequently means that that's the first time they're staying in that place with that brand. And so the hotel team has this sort of local knowledge and expertise that becomes very critical to sort of educating them on that experience. And when we can reduce the boundaries to have those conversations and ask things in a more frictionless way, all of a sudden you discover that you can sort of tap into this untapped source of expertise. And so our goal is to sort of make that much easier and elevate a use case that the guests didn't even know was there, right? Sort of bring them into it and let them become the local expert for them, so that no matter where they are with that brand, they have that sort of resource accessible to them.
Great. And then last question for both Blaire and for Aman. When you look ahead over the next 2 to 3 years, what aspect of technology in this realm are you most excited to build in your companies and get out to market? Aman, I'll start with you.
Most excited. I wish any of us knew what the next 2 to 3 years held. This is one of the most predictably unpredictable spaces I think we've ever seen. I would say there's a few things that are definitely true. Things like latency, things like the quality of speech are definitely getting better at an unprecedented clip. And what that will power for this to feel more human, to the point where we actually get rid of some of that scar tissue I keep talking about on your concerns when you're interacting with an agent like this, very excited about, because I think people will lean in more to actually finding the value that is behind your first or second turn with an agent like this. And the second is what I think was a theme earlier, the ability to have a proliferation of agents. So The way that we structure this, for example, is if you ask a question that would normally go to your concierge about a specific restaurant nearby, there's actually a different agent that is answering that question versus the same concierge use case about an activity, and a different agent that's referring to a request that you have for a runner to come bring you towels. And so there's already sort of an agent force back here, but how you orchestrate this, stitch together the answers so that everything feels completely seamless and a handoff to a human is seamless, those technologies are still very nascent. So I'm excited to see those really remove all of the friction and some of the early challenges that I think we're seeing in the industry.
Great. Blaire?
That's Rita and all of her friends.
Yeah. yeah. Blaire, bring us home.
Yeah, I think from our perspective with the utilization, I'm going to tell a quick story. Customers are no longer going to Google any longer, right? We're going, I was in Portugal, and we were on a gondola, and they are talking about her dad is saying, Google it. And the girl says, I'm not going to Google it. I'm going to use ChatGPT. And that is the evolution, right? That is the today. And that's only going to continue to happen. And so in the hospitality space, or hotels for us specifically, we want to be that. We want to see that MCP side of things. We want to continue to evolve there, but bring that connected piece to. Now we know you like four towels in your room before you arrive. We know that you're going to want 2 waters, or you specifically like a Diet Coke or a Diet Snapple because it's out there, and I haven't had a Diet Snapple in forever, right? Whatever the case may be, because that's the part of that connected trip for you. And so bringing that into the hospitality, but driving it home to the hotel instead of to that third party to help really drive the hotel bookings.
Great. I thought you were going to say no phone trees.
No phone trees. No.
Very good. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.